Today we're going to solve systems, and we have two different methods. The first one we're going to do is called substitution. And you know which method to use is when you have a single variable. So if you look at this problem right here, example 1, we have a single variable. So we're going to substitute that in for the y. So if I look at my 4x minus 3, instead of putting a y, I'm going to substitute what it equals. In this case, it's a negative x minus 1, and all that equals 24. Now I'm just going to solve this equation for x and get my answer. So in this case, 4x I distribute, which is positive 3x, positive 3 equals 24. And if I combine like terms, I get 7x plus 3 equals 24. Oops. 24. And now I can subtract 3 and divide by 7. Subtract 3. So I get 7x equals 21, and if I divide by 7, I get x equals 3. So that gives me my x value, but now I need to find my y value. So I substitute this back in to the equation that I used. So I'm going to substitute. So now I have y equals a negative 3 minus 1, and so y equals a negative 4. So my answers are 3 and negative 4. Let's continue doing the substitution method. Once again, when we have a variable all by itself, we're going to substitute. So y equals all of that. I'm going to substitute 5x minus 1 plus 1, and then 5 times x plus 1, because that's what's on the right side. So I've substituted right here. So now I can combine like terms. These zeros, so I have 5x equals 5x plus 5. And I'm going to subtract my 5x because I always put my letters on my left. And now I get a 0. Once again, we get these situations where the variables cancel out, but these don't equal, so this is a no solution. Let's look at our next one. I'm going to substitute, use the substitution method. So I have 4x plus, and I'm going to substitute 3 minus 2x for y equals 6. And so when I distribute, I get plus 6 minus 4x equals 6. In this case, when I combine like terms, these go to 0, plus 6 equals 6. So I get the same number. This is why it's called all solutions. Oops, all solutions, all real numbers, all real numbers. And there's my answer. So this is what's called infinite. And if you look back over here, this one is inconsistent because there's no solution. The second type of solving linear equations is when the variable is not by itself. And they call it the addition method, but we're really going to start with multiplication and then we're going to add. And what we're going to do is we're going to take whatever is in front of this first x and we're going to put it by changing its sign, and then whatever is on the front of the first x, we write exactly. So I change the sign because there's ones, and when I multiply negative 1 times x, I get negative 1x. Negative 1 times y is a negative 1y, and negative 1 times 4 gives me a negative 4. And then when I multiply 1 times everything, I'm going to get 1x on the bottom minus 1y minus plus 6. Now I'm going to add. When I add, this goes to 0. This add to a negative 2y, and this adds to a positive 2. And when I divide by a negative 2, I get y equals a negative 1. Once again, once we know 1, we can substitute back in, and I'll substitute in this top one. X minus 1 equals 4, and if I add 1 to both sides, oops, I just want to make sure that that's not a negative. So when I do that, I get x equals a 5. And so there's my second solution. So this method is the addition method. I'm adding, notice the addition, but I'm going to multiply to get them so I can add. Let's look at this problem down here. I'm going to take this 6 and I'm going to make it a negative 6, and I'm going to make that a 4. So I multiply through negative 24x minus 36y equals a negative 72. And then when I multiply by 4, I get 24x, 36y, and equals 48. I'm going to add, always add. This goes to 0, but this also goes to 0. So I get 0, and when we do this, I get 24, but they're not equal, so this is a no solution. So let's take a look at this next one. I'm going to do my multiplication, so I'm going to change that to a 4 and a 2. Always change the top one. So 4 times 2 is 8x. 8x minus 4y equals 12. And then I get a negative 8x plus 4y equals a negative 12. And when I add all of this, I get 0, 0, 0. So I get 0 equals 0, which means we have all real numbers. So what I've shown you is when it comes out, when it doesn't work, and when we get all real numbers.